Welcome back to Half the Battle. I'm your host, as always, Daniel Levy, your guest co-host, Uncle Weezy. Today we're going to be talking about UFC 301, Alexandre Pantoja versus Steve Erceg for the undisputed flyweight title of the world, and also the return of the legend, Jose Aldo, taking on the young stud, Jonathan Martinez and Weezy. It's going down this Saturday night live at the Junisse Arena in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. The UFC is back in the homeland that started everything for martial arts. Well, I know people are going to say Japan and whatnot, but the martial arts we watch started in Brazil, and now we're back. And Weezy, what a main event we got this weekend.
How about it, man? You know, people talking about a real life Rocky story. I mean, it's not quite like that. I mean, this guy Erceg's really good. You know, he's good everywhere. And he's fighting a guy in Pantoja who has been a part of this division since it started in the UFC, since the Ultimate Fighter, you know, brought on all these guys 1 through 16, from Brandon Moreno, you know, Pantoja, all these guys. Pantoja's still here. He's still the best. He's still the guy that they really kind of brought on to win this whole thing. And it took him a while to get there, but now he's there. He's on top. He's trying to defend that belt again. And I can't wait for this fight.
Yeah, man. And we're going to give all our analysis, our picks for the entire card. But actually, Weezy, I got a friend who, in my opinion, is a top 15 ranked flyweight and knows Pantoja better than everyone. Has sparred hundreds of rounds with him, knows him on a personal level, is his friend. So I'd like to bring in the one and only UFC flyweight Cody Durden to the show. Cody, welcome back to Half the Battle.
What's happening? Glad to be back, man.
Oh, man, the pleasure's all mine. So, I mean, I felt like this was the perfect event to get you on. You know Pantoja more than any of us. Like I said, you've sparred hundreds of rounds with him. He's not just your sparring partner. He's your friend. And I feel like you have more insight than anyone else. So we're going to give our analysis and whatnot, but I want to hear it directly from the horse's mouth. I mean, what's it like in the room with a guy like that? I mean, you've sparred with hundreds of people throughout your career, but is it different in there with a guy with the championship skills and mindset like a guy like Pantoja?
Yeah, his mindset's just a whole nother level. And, you know, I think it's going to be a good fight, but a dominant fight from Pantoja. You know, he's going to take some shots and he's still going to be there. And, you know, I'm taking second round submission. I think Erceg's going to come out strong. He's going to land some good shots, but man, Pantoja, he takes them. You know, I don't think I've seen him drop before, and
only by Davison. And I mean, normally when guys get hit by Davison, they go out cold. So I mean, that just speaks credit to the chin of Pantoja. You know?
Yeah. Well, that's good insight. I didn't know that, but yeah, man, I think he's gonna come out and secure a takedown and grind him out, you know, the first round. And in the second round, Erceg's going to start to fade, and it's going to be either ground and pound or a submission.
You know what's interesting? Because I know me and Weezy are going to talk about this, how Pantoja's probably got one of the best back takes, not just in the flyweight division, but in the UFC in general. And you, as someone who's sparred with him and rolled with him multiple times, can you tell me what that back take is like? And once he's on your back, how dangerous is he?
Yeah, I mean, just once he gets on top of you, he's dangerous. You know, you can try to play the guard game, and he's excellent at passing the guard. And I mean, he's just a well-rounded fighter. You know, he hits very hard for the division, and yeah, once he takes your back, you know, it's hard to get up. It's hard to get away, and I'm grateful to be able to be in the room with him and help him out this fight camp. You know, I was there the whole month of March and at ATT Coconut Creek, and we had a few sparring rounds together, and we wrestled together every day. You know, I was kind of like Steve Erceg because, you know, my striking's pretty good, and of course I got wrestling, but it was good, man. It was a learning experience for me, and you know, I taught him some things as well.
And you feel like right now he's firing on all cylinders. I mean, he's got to be locked in defending the belt in Brazil of all places.
Oh, absolutely, man. you know, his attitude, you know, towards being the champion is just undescribable. You know, like I feel like his mindset's just there, you know, and, you know, he told me he's going to finish Steve Erceg, and I believe him.
Now, Weezy, man, you got any questions for Durden regarding this? Because I feel like, you know, like I mentioned, he's got the insight on Pantoja that none of us have, that intimate knowledge. He's been in the room with him. I want to say hundreds of times, but possibly thousands of times at this point. I mean, if we're going to get the insight, it's from this man. You got something for him, Weezy?
I mean, when I look at Pantoja, you know, I see a guy that's just incredibly experienced, incredibly durable, and very dangerous with his submissions. Once that guy gets on your back, and you've already covered it, you asked what it's like when this dude gets on your back. Tell me about the striking, though, right? Because I look at the numbers here. They're above average for the division. He's got 4 knockdowns. He's only been knocked down once. I mean, like the durability, the power this guy has in his hands. Like we talk about minute winning and moment winning, you know, the ability to get those knockdowns, to get those big shots, maybe a back take and a scramble, a submission. But like, can Pantoja be the type of guy that goes out there for 25 minutes and outboxes somebody without even trying to take them down and be able to win at a high clip at the level that he's fighting at right now in the UFC?
Yeah, well, Mike, that's where I think you're wrong. I don't think this is MMA. He's not going to be standing the whole time. He's going to get it to the ground. And he's going to, you know, do what Pantoja does. Take shots, give back 3 shots, and then look for the takedown. And who's stopped it? Brendan Royval hasn't stopped it. Brandon Moreno hasn't stopped it. You know, some things, if it's not broken, then why fix it?
Facts. And lastly, before I let you go, what have you made of Steve Erceg's quick climb to a UFC title 3 fights in? And granted, the guys he beat, no disrespect to them at all, Dvorak, Costa, Schnell. I mean, you know my opinion. If you're a UFC flyweight and you haven't figured out how to beat Matt Schnell yet, there's a problem. However, that being said, this is why people are counting out a guy like Erceg. But despite the competition he's faced, I think he's a pretty skilled guy, and he is big for the weight class, Cody.
Yeah, I believe so too. And if you've done your research on him, you know, before the UFC, he's got a nasty high elbow guillotine that he's hit quite a few times, or at least attempted it. And, you know, as far as experience, you know, Pantoja's 11-3 in the UFC. Steve Erceg's 3-0 in the UFC. And that experience alone is detrimental to this fight. You know, Pantoja's been under the big lights. He's defended his title. He's won the title, and I don't see Steve Erceg knocking him out. You know, because of the durability of Pantoja. So, with that being said, you know, I think this is a mismatch. You know, there's a lot tougher guys in the division, and you know, some people's paths are easier than others. You know, he hasn't fought. He hasn't fought. You know, like the top contenders in the division. You know, Dvorak, 3-fight losing streak. Matt Schnell, he's been knocked out like 6 or 7 times. No disrespect, he's a great guy. I like the guy. And then Alexandre Costa, his UFC debut? I don't even know his record now. What is it like?
He's 1-2. Yeah.
1-2. So you tell me, brother. But you know, from what we've seen, he's a good fighter. But what competition has he faced?
No, facts. It's just about rising to the occasion. And I forgot to mention their records and the odds. So Alexandre Pantoja, 27-5. I mean, 30 plus fights. Steve Erceg, 12-1. Currently, they got it -190 Pantoja, +165 Erceg. So these odds don't reflect a mismatch. So obviously, I know you can't bet you're a UFC fighter, but if you weren't a UFC fighter, from your perspective, there's value on Pantoja, you know, because -190 does not reflect a mismatch.
Right. And that's the beautiful thing about the sport, though. You just never know what's going to happen. So I could be talking, saying it's going to go this way, and then one good shot and it's all over. So that's the beautiful thing about the sport.
Definitely. Well, Cody, before I get you out of here, man, I want 2 picks from you. Jose Aldo versus Jonathan Martinez. No analysis necessary, but just a pick.
Man, I got to take Martinez. He's on a roll, and he's the younger fighter, and he's showed a dominant skill set everywhere. As far as the striking, I haven't watched too many of his fights, but I know he's a dog. What is that? 8-fight win streak, 7-fight win streak.
Yeah, 5, 6, maybe 7. What is it? I gotta look this up because he's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-fight win streak. 6-fight win streak, yeah. And it's against legit guys. I mean, he beat Said Nurmagomedov, Yanez, beat a legend in Swanson, and what I like about Martinez, he's had his ups and downs. He's had to pay his dues. So you love to see that. And then I want to ask you this too, because Martinez's best friend is your former opponent, Chris Gutierrez. You make your UFC debut up a weight class on a week's short notice against Gutierrez. And the only reason I'm bringing this up is because they have very similar styles. They like to kick hard and they like to kind of skirt away. Not much boxing, but disgusting kicks and very similar. So I know we've spoken about this privately, but can you tell the fans what Chris Gutierrez kicks are like? And the reason I say that is because Martinez kicks have to be just as hard, if not harder.
Yeah. I think I took 47 leg kicks from Chris Gutierrez, and I had a little hematoma on the side of my leg, but that was in 2 rounds too, I believe so, because I took him down and controlled him the whole first round. I think it was 47 leg kicks, if I recall correctly. That was 4 years ago, but yeah. If he's anything like, if Martinez kicks anything like Gutierrez, then it's a problem.
Yeah, and lastly, there's one more flyweight fight on this card. Now, I'm not sure how familiar you are with these two. I know you pay attention, but we mentioned Alessandro Costa, and he's taking on the Peruvian Kevin Borjas, the kid that just lost to Joshua Van, but it was a great fight. You got any opinion on that one?
Yeah, I haven't seen them fight much. I thought you were going to ask me about the Charles Johnson versus Jake Hadley.
Oh, that's next week.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we'll talk about that next week then. But Costa seems like he's still green, but definitely has potential. Perugia, I haven't seen him fight before, I don't think.
Got you. Weezy, any last things for Cody before we get him out of here?
Who do you got next, Cody?
I don't know yet.
Oh, still waiting. Okay. All right. I'm looking forward to it because I love your wrestling, brother. I know that from my analytics studies of all the divisions in the UFC, the flyweight division has the most wrestling by far out of any division in the UFC. The amount of takedowns that you need in order to win fights there is crazy. It's way above average. So I love seeing guys with the cardio to push a grappling heavy pace and to wear on their opponents and break them down and finish them late. So I love watching you fight, man. I can't wait to see what's next for you.
Thank you, man. And I appreciate that. But don't look forward to too much wrestling because I've been working a lot on my hands now. I didn't shoot my last fight, and Jake Hadley was shooting at the end of the 3rd round. So I'm trying to get some knockouts. I'm trying to
and let's not forget Charles Johnson got rocked too. But we'll talk about that next week. So, next week, your 2 sons are fighting, Jake Hadley and Charles Johnson. So I'm going to get you back on the show next week to break down that fight. Cody, really appreciate you taking a couple minutes of your time and give us your insight, and have fun out there fishing, man. What are you trying to catch out there? What kind of fish they got?
Largemouth bass, man. I like to bass fish with artificial lures. I've been doing it since I was young, and it passes time, man. It passes time.
Awesome, man. You deserve it, buddy. We'll talk very soon. All right. Appreciate your insight.
All right. Nice to meet you, Mike. See you. Bye.
Same to you, Cody. Take care.
Hey, you know we had to get the insight from the man Cody Dern, and I feel like he really told us a lot about the kind of mindset, the kind of hard worker that Pantoja is. But let's get down to business, Uncle Weezy, because listen, man, this main event is fantastic because Pantoja, I'm always, and I want to kind of consider myself biased, when you get a violence type champion. Like, not just a violence fighter. I love my violence fighters, but when a violence fighter becomes a champion, like how do you not just shed a tear as the kind of fans that we are? You know, I know you were talking about you love the wrestling. I love the wrestling too. I'm a grappler too, but I'm just saying, like, we love guys that go out there because, like, Pantoja could fight for a BMF belt. Like, people like to shit on the BMF belt and this and that, but like the BMF belt is exclusive for guys that go to war. You will. No disrespect to the guys I'm going to name, but you will never see Aljamain Sterling fighting for a BMF belt.
Yeah.
You just won't. Pantoja is a guy you can see do that because, and to see him as the champ, it's just amazing to me. And it brings me back to that fight he had against Davison, which I'm glad we brought up earlier, how, like, when you eat Davison's best shots and you're still walking forward, you understand what I'm saying, Weezy? Like, that's the kind of heart, the kind of chin, the kind of resolve, the kind of mental fortitude, the kind of dog this man has. And the only kind of criticisms we've had for Pantoja, and I want to be very kind of careful about how I word this. You know, people will talk about his cardio. He might gas out in some fights. Let's be very specific about what we mean when we say that. It's not that Pantoja, you know, he woke up in the morning at 6 a.m. and, hey, I'm going to smoke a joint instead of doing my miles. It's not that. It's that when you have that balls to the wall style, you're a killer be killed fighter. You're going 100 miles per hour. You see the scrambles he had against Moreno. I mean, not once, not twice, but thrice, but I'm referring to the title fight, right? You see the Royval fight. Like, I know Royval doesn't have the best takedown defense, but you know damn well, Weezy, that Royval is always scrambling. Royval is making you work. You might take him down, but what, you think you're just going to pass his guard like that and submit the guy? Like, the guy is making you work. And that kind of shit is tiring, man. So I give Pantoja a pass for these times that he's gassed and stuff like that, because, again, it's not about, you know, him not being in shape. The guy's a fucking world champion. Of course he's in shape. It's about the effort and the output. He pushes that pedal to the metal, goes 100 miles per hour. As a result, we've made this example many times. Gas tanks will dwindle as a result. Steve Erceg, he's big for the division. For MMA standards, his boxing is not half bad. The guy can grapple too. Yeah. Listen, the level of competition hasn't been the best. And Weezy, I'd love to sit here and look you in the eye with a straight face and, you know, speak in absolutes and talk about how no guy that lost to Denny's Bonder is beating Alexandre Pantoja in a fight and, you know, be funny and cute. But you know that doesn't mean shit. You know, you can't do MMA math. It's all about the matchup at hand. And how much has he leveled up since that point? And again, even though the 3 fights he's had in the UFC, you know, no disrespect to the fighters, but softer competition compared to the top 5. You know, he didn't have to go through a Manel Cap. He didn't have to go through the now surging Alex Perez. He didn't have to go through a Mokaev. You know, he got, like I said, if you're a UFC fighter and you haven't figured out how to beat Matt Schnell yet, there's a problem. But he got past them. So now he gets this opportunity. I'm not counting him out, but I am going with Pantoja here, man. I really think that paying your dues counts for a lot. And take all that aside, I think he can bang with him, and he's going to get the back at some point. Now, whether he finishes there or not remains to be seen. But, you know, Cody was thinking it was going to be an early finish. I'm curious about that. I'm kind of more leaning towards a decision because I do think Steve Erceg is that tough. I think he seems kind of durable, but you never know. But my official pick is Alexandre Pantoja, and still.
And I'm with you there. You know, I really feel like Pantoja is the guy that's going to, you know, like if you look at this on paper, and that's one of the things that I always do. Before I look at the tape, I'm going to wiki cap the fight, so to speak. I'm going to look at the measurables. I'm going to look at the pro and UFC experience. I'm going to look at the finish stats. How do these guys win fights? How do these guys lose fights? You know, and how does that match up for this particular matchup? Look at the striking, the distance striking, the grappling, the strength of schedule stats. And that's something that Cody touched on here. I I mean, of course, Erceg hasn't fought the same level of competition that Pantoja has. You look at Erceg's record, he's 3-0 in the UFC, and you sum up the records of the guys that he's beaten thus far, 10 wins and 11 losses. Then you go over to the Pantoja side. He's got 14 UFC fights. You add up the records of the guys that he's fought, 85 and 58. You add up the records of the guys that he's beaten, 62 and 47. So, yeah, man, I mean, like, this is a massive, like, it's like 4 or 5 rungs up the ladder from Matt Schnell is where Erceg is fighting now. Not in Australia, not in the UFC Apex in front of 22 fans. In Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, they're going to be chanting, "You're going to die" in Portuguese when he's walking out.
Vai morrer.
Yeah, man. You're gonna morrer, and mohair there. Yeah, I mean, like morir in Spanish, mohair in Brazilian. It's so much to ask. It's just so much to ask, man.
And this is kind of, narrative or speculation or whatnot, but is Pantoja going to have one of those walkouts where it's like a homecoming and he's crying on the walk, a big adrenaline dump? And I'm just worried about a balls to the wall early start and then just kind of fatiguing from that adrenaline dump, being at home, like, the passion, like you've dreamed your whole life of not just being a champion, Weezy, but defending that belt in Brazil in front of your home crowd. Jose Aldo's your co-main event, Weezy. You grew up watching Jose Aldo, and he's fighting before you. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, yeah, it's going to be a big moment. And the thing about it, we mentioned earlier, Pantoja's record, 27-5, over 30 pro fights. Like, he's the kind of guy that I think can probably, manage that moment, the emotions involved, and put everything in check and kind of just put those blinders on and go out there tunnel vision and get the job done. But of course, you have to bring up the concerns because it's still a fight at the end of the day, and Erceg can fight. Like, I know he hasn't fought the who's who, but Erceg can fight. I respect him a lot. So I expect some early, fun moments, but eventually, let's see if Pantoja can kind of, take his back a little bit. Whether he submits him or not remains to be seen, but I'm going Pantoja decision here.
And I'm with you. I'm going Pantoja decision as well.
And Cody's going Pantoja early finish. So let's see. Let's see. One of us might be right, or all of us might be wrong. Let's see. So it'll be good. Co-main event of the evening in the bantamweight division. We got the legend, the Hall of Famer, the former WEC champion, the former UFC champion, and let's be clear about this. The last ever WEC featherweight champion, the first ever UFC featherweight champion. And now he's dropping to bantamweight, which he has his last few fights. And he's taking on the young stud. Did I mention Aldo's record? 31-8. He's taking on the young stud, Jonathan Martinez, who's 19-4. Currently, they got it. Jonathan Martinez, minus 150. The comeback on Jose Aldo is plus 130. So, man, you have to bring up the fact that Aldo has retired before already, and he's coming back, from a retirement fight. And allegedly this is his second retirement fight because, I mean, didn't he fight like Merab in like Salt Lake City or some shit? Like, dude, like, and it wasn't it the same night that like Leon head kicked Kamaru? Am I correct about that? Like, I'm pretty sure it was that night. And it was a very frustrating fight because, firstly, okay, there's a lot to discuss about that fight. Like, from a market perspective, you know what odds I paid on Merab there? Around the same odds that they're charging on Martinez here. And I think that Merab is, look, at minimum, a future title challenger. Now, others might think a future champion. I'm not saying he is. I'm not saying he isn't. But at least give me future title challenger. And Martinez is great. I love watching him fight. But why lay the same price on Martinez that you laid on Jose Aldo? And the Jose Aldo fight, I was glad we skirted past it, but like, damn, like Merab didn't get a single takedown. I think Jose, how many takedowns did Jose stuff? Was it like 16 or 17 or something?
Oh, I got the numbers in front of me. I'll get them for you right now, but keep going.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, it was kind of one of those pin him up against the fence for 3 rounds type fight. Jose's going to stuff the takedowns, but wasn't able to quite create the separation necessary. And we're going to talk about separation when we talk about the Oralbai versus Brenner fight too. We're going to get to that. But you know, it was just kind of one of those close kind of fights where maybe Aldo landed a couple better strikes, but he was pinned against the fence for the majority of the fight, stuffing takedowns. And we know that Jose has legendary takedown defense. But like I said, from a market perspective, when I'm laying, I think off the top of my head, it's been a while. It's been like 2 years. I laid what, minus 170, minus 175 on Merab. And I thought we clearly won, but I also thought that it wasn't like a blowout. It wasn't like, you know, oh, he should have really been minus 300 in hindsight or anything like that. So when you get Jonathan Martinez around the same price, that's where I kind of have the question marks. Now, don't get me wrong. It's 2 years later. It's after retirement. Is this a case, Weezy, where you think that Jose just kind of wanted that homecoming retirement, like put the gloves down in the center of the octagon in front of his people, get a matchup in a guy like Martinez who's going to bang it out with him. And whether he wins or loses, he's going to go out in honorable style because Martinez isn't going to hump his leg. Martinez isn't going to, you know, do some shit that makes the crowd boo. Martinez is going to come right at him and try to kick his legs off. And we talk about Martinez leg kicks, but Weezy, one thing we don't often talk about that people forget, what about Martinez step through knee? We'll talk about the Science fight, but what about back in the day against Luigi Burin? And he was getting taken down early in that fight, and he comes back. That step through knee by Martinez is absolutely disgusting. He's getting more comfortable. He's confident, and he can chop anyone down. The thing is, I've seen Aldo in there with a real leg kicker in Pedro Munoz. And granted, Pedro Munoz, that was like the first time I've ever seen Pedro Munoz kind of like starstruck in a fight. Like Pedro Munoz was literally in there, like in the center of the octagon, asking Aldo for a selfie, asking him for an autograph. I really think that Pedro Munoz probably had a poster of Aldo on his wall growing up, kind of like Moicano did, you know? So they just have so much respect. Whereas Martinez, he doesn't strike me as a guy that even like watches MMA or gives a shit, or to him, it's just another opponent. So I don't think he's going to be starstruck. But where there are holes that Aldo can exploit is I've never thought Martinez boxing was particularly the best. He's a fantastic kicker, especially from range. He can chop you down. He can go all three levels, to the leg, to the body, to the head, the knees. But I think Aldo's a much better boxer here. And back in the day, you remember the dangerous Jose Aldo kicks, but we haven't quite seen those since the zombie fight as much. You know, a little bit here and there, but mostly he's been kind of getting really into boxing lately. And that's what makes it interesting, because I think this is going to come down to the distance the fight is played at. In the pocket, I'm favoring Aldo. At distance, I'm favoring Martinez. Where do you kind of think the fight plays out at most? And what was the stat we were just talking about? Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent, so I'm forgetting about everything.
We were talking about the how many takedowns he stuffed against Merab. 0 of 16. Merab was on takedowns. But he got about 5 minutes of control time, so he was just hugging him. You know, really, I mean, he got no takedowns, but he got about 5 minutes of control time. So that just tells you he's hugging him along the fence.
No doubt. So from your perspective, do you kind of like which distance do you think the fight is going to primarily play out at? Boxing range, kicking range?
Me, I think it's going to take place at kicking range. One of the things that's always frustrated me the most about Aldo is that he's one of the most well-rounded fighters I've ever seen. And I've heard somebody make this comparison before, and I've always felt the same way. Jose Aldo would be like, if he just boxed, he'd be a top 10 boxer. If he just did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, he'd be top 10 in the world. If he just did Muay Thai, he'd probably be top 10 in the world. But like when he goes out there to fight, Dan, he doesn't attempt takedowns. Why? You know, he as a matter of fact, I don't even like the fact that he doesn't throw as many leg kicks as he should. It seems like
as he used to. Yes, as he used to, because that was something that we saw that used to be such a huge part of his attack. Back when before people were using calf kicks, Aldo was out there blasting the thigh, blasting the calf, you know, working his way up the body to find the big shots later. And now it seems like he's doing the opposite of that. He's boxing more. He's falling in love with his hands. And that's a good way to kind of like preserve your gas tank. Make sure that you never really gas out, is just kind of coast and spar at the level that you're used to going at. But
Jonathan Martinez is a very efficient grappler, right? He attempts less takedowns than his opponents do. He gets less takedowns than his opponents do, but he gets more of the control time. So he's hard to take down and hold down. And if he takes you down, you might stay down for a while. So I like the fact that Martinez is 7 years younger. I like the fact that I think I can count on him a little bit more at kicking range to win the minutes. Both of these guys have power, and I can't really count on Aldo to grapple. And then you talked about this too, Dan, and that's, is this really like Aldo coming back to get a win? Or is it that the UFC 301 card was in big trouble and the UFC said, we need a local Brazilian that's going to put asses in the seats?
Well, let me say this, and I'm sorry to cut you off.
No problem.
So I think there is validity to what you're saying that, hey, let's kind of, stack it up a little bit. But they initially wanted to do Jose Aldo versus Dominic Cruz. But as you know, Weezy, Cruz is always injured. He wasn't able to take the fight. I doubt that he had issues going to Brazil. Cruz is a fucking how many time world champ, so I don't think Cruz was out here like, no, I don't, I think he was probably injured or something. I don't know. So if someone knows, y'all let me know. But I think that he probably turned down because he's fucking injured, year round. The guy was a champ and then he, didn't come back for like 4 years at one point. You remember that? So I think that's what it was. And then Martinez was the next guy up. And what's interesting about it is when you look at Martinez win streak, right? 6-fight win streak, and you look at the guys he's beat, right? He beat some stud prospects in Said Nurmagomedov and Adrian Yanez. He beat a legend in Cub Swanson. You go out there and you beat the Hall of Famer, not future Hall of Famer, current Hall of Famer, Jose Aldo. I mean, you're right in the mix. And not only that, Weezy, even if you're not next for a title shot or whatnot, your stock raises to a point, when MVP goes like this.
Yeah.
That's how your stock raises when you beat Jose Aldo, especially let alone in Brazil. But stylistically, it's so intriguing to me. So because my reference point is the Pedro Munoz fight, but even that is tough to reference because Pedro's an orthodox fighter. Martinez is a southpaw, right? I'm pretty.
Yeah, he is. He's
a southpaw fighter. So. And Martinez, a lot younger than Pedro, taller, bigger, kind of represents that new generation of bantamweight. So it's tough, man. It's tough. And I'm so biased. Like, you can't really see what I got on my wall here, but I only have like autograph memorabilia of bad motherfuckers. Okay. So when you look at my wall, which I'll show one day, first autograph picture is Jose Aldo with a WEC belt. Then we got Donald Cowboy Cerrone, Hall of Famer as well. Then we got Daniel Cormier, Hall of Famer as well. And then we got Matt Brown, most knockouts in welterweight history. Then we got a WEC belt signed by Dominic Cruz and Carlos Condit. Like, these are the guys that I love, and I'll go on tangents and whatnot. But I'm just trying to say I'm biased towards Aldo. Like, I mean, I remember, I think it was, when was this guy in the WEC? Let's see. WEC fights. Okay, back in 2008. Like, was I like in college or like just graduating high school back then or something? Like, I don't even remember the dates of any of this shit anymore. But like, dude, I've been watching this guy since I was a kid. Like, I remember staying home watching WEC on Versus with the blue canvas. And we talk about Martinez's amazing win over Cub Swanson. You know who has an even more amazing win over Cub Swanson?
I know.
Jose Aldo double flying knee him in 8 seconds. So, I can shed a tear talking about this man's accomplishments. But let me say this too. I mean, like, his recent wins are against guys that are currently ranked in the top 10 and top 15. Marlon Vera. And let me kind of, not give you too much pushback, but you were saying you kind of wanted to see Jose Aldo use all his tools, right? And I think that's a very valid point because lately he's fallen in love with the boxing. In the Chito Vera fight, 1-1 going into round 3, he takes the back of Chito Vera and rides him out the entire round. Hey, that is some vet tactics. That is some vet smarts. I guess the big question is, with a retired fighter, and I know you saw some of his recent boxing matches, where's the motivation at? Like, where's he at? And then another topic. There's another thing we got to talk about. No USADA testing. We're in Brazil. Has Jose Aldo been harvesting the garden of life, fruits and vegetables? So dude, there's so many different factors that go into this fight that to me it's amazing. And I'm just praying, as a fanboy, that Jose Aldo gets into that boxing distance, rips to the body, goes upstairs. We have seen vulnerabilities in the boxing defense and the chin of Martinez. I'm not just talking about when Davey Grant knocked him out. I'm talking about what about when Alejandro Perez dropped him, and that was like a 50-50 fight if I remember correctly. What about the time when Andre Sukumtut dropped him twice? What about the time when Andre Ewell beat him? Yeah, call it a robbery all you want, but the fact that you weren't able to distinguish yourself like from Andre Ewell, like, listen, again, you can score that fight for Martinez all you want, but like that, the margin should have been a lot wider is what I'm trying to say, Weezy. And I know I'm going off on a ridiculous tangent, so please, floor is yours. Go ahead, give me all your points now, because I'll keep going to the end of time.
No, I mean, I covered most of it, because the thing about this fight is you and I, we're gamblers, Dan. We're playing the number. We're not playing the names. We're always trying to play that number. And, we might bet against our favorite fighters sometimes. We might bet on fighters that we absolutely despise sometimes. If the number is right, you can make us gamblers do just about anything. But when there's some kind of like some ambiguity having to do with narrative type of stuff. In this case, is Jose Aldo a mixed martial artist anymore? Is he really going out there to win this fight? I know it's in heel. I know he would love to win this fight, right? Of course he'd love to win this fight, but it's more than wanting it. In this sport, you got to get in the gym. You got to train everything. Is he wrestling? Is he putting on a gi? In
fairness, if you stuff 16 takedowns from Merab, let's not discredit. I get the approach in terms of he's not going to be really going for too many takedowns, and the leg kicks haven't really been there since the zombie fight.
Yeah.
But he's still well-rounded, man. I mean, to stuff 16 takedowns from a guy like Merab, who took down Olympic gold medalist Henry Cejudo, of all people, picked him up and slammed him Matt Hughes style. Couldn't do that to Jose Aldo.
But remember, that was a year and 8 months ago, Dan.
Very true.
And that's what I'm talking about here. I mean, since then, we've seen him crying his eyes out, getting inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame, something that needed to happen. He's taken boxing fights. He's probably partying a lot more. And I hope he is. I hope Jose Aldo is enjoying his life and just absolutely being treated like the celebrity that he is in his home country. He doesn't need to win this fight, is my point. It was a year and 8 months ago that he stuffed all those takedowns from Merab. This fight was the last fight that was put on this card. It was like they called up Jose. They probably drove a truckload of money up to his house. And they were like, man, Jose, one more time. We'll give you a pure striker that you can go out there and box against. He's not gonna put you in the hospital. 3 rounds in front of your home crowd. Let's go out like this. And I'm wondering if we're going to see the Jose Aldo of old. I think it's a legitimate question. And because I have that question, I'm staying away from the money line. Because if the old Jose Aldo shows up, I'm going to look like a genius for betting him at plus 150. If the Jose Aldo that I think might shows up and he loses, and he gets picked apart at range by a better kicker and he doesn't try to wrestle and he doesn't try to close the distance, and he just coasts, picks up his bag, and goes to a party afterwards, I wouldn't be surprised either. So I'm staying away from betting it. That's my analysis on the fight.
I mean, listen, we can sit here and just the rest of the podcast talk about this fight because I feel like you can make strong arguments for both, but we have to move on. Official pick Martinez for you?
Martinez decision is the official pick. Yeah, we'll go with that.
And I think that's very logical. But since at the moment I don't have any money involved, I'm going to be a fanboy and pick the great Jose Aldo. And let's see what happens. A man can hope, right? Now, featured bout in the light heavyweight division, we got the seasoned vet. Listen to this record. We got Anthony Smith. He's 37-19. And Weezy, that's all we know about. That's all we know. For a fact that Anthony Smith has like probably 50 other fights that aren't even on his record that we don't know about. Like, this dude has been through the ringer, the ups and downs. Like, man, all respect to the OG, you know, but he's taking on Vitor Petrino, who's 11-0, and currently, my man, this is where things get interesting. They got it. Vitor Petrino minus 600. The comeback on Anthony Smith is plus 425. And I got to tell you what, I've been very impressed with Vitor Petrino. Last year, I gave him the award for half the battle rookie of the year. And that it was against a lot of tough candidates. You know, Elvis Brenner was on this card. Could have easily got that. I'm pretty damn sure Gomis gave Brenner the rookie of the year. And I gave it to Petrino. And the way I see Petrino, like, I pride myself on like what kind of trajectories I see fighters having. And sometimes you know, sometimes you don't know. But I'm pretty confident in saying that I think this guy's a future top 10 guy. Like I want to say, like with a straight face, look at y'all eye to eye. I think Vitor Petrino is a future top 10 guy, like for sure. When you look at a Yoel Romero or a Paulo Costa, I think that this guy represents the next generation of that kind of Hercules physique, but he's well-rounded. The guy can go out there. He's got that one-punch knockout power, but he can also mix in his wrestling. And you see a physique like that, you think he's going to fatigue and whatnot, and he pushes through his fatigue. He's got that. He doesn't just have big muscles. He's got a big fucking heart and big balls too. And I really like everything about this guy. And Anthony Smith, I got to be very careful about how I word what I'm about to say. But if you have been around the game, and I don't mean this in a condescending or arrogant way, but if you've been around the game as long as Weezy and I have, you remember that Anthony Smith was like a journeyman in like what Strike Force and fucking was it Elite XC or some of the like these Iowa regional scenes, and like, dude, the guy has like picked himself back up in a way to make it to a title. Like, if you would have told me that Anthony Smith was going to get a title shot against John Jones like 5 years prior to when he did it, I would have been like the bum from Strike Force. Remember when Luke Rockhold called him the bum from Strike Force? Like, and the fact that like Anthony Smith made it to where he made it. But this is where it might sound like I'm discrediting him. And I respect Anthony so much, but I want to be frank. I want to be 100 as always and keep it a buck with y'all, because listen, man, when you go out there and the way you earn your title shot is he beat the Hall of Famer Rashad Evans, but he beat Rashad Evans when Rashad Evans was washed to a point of no return. He beat Mauricio Shogun, who I mean, when we talk about BMFs, when we talk about guys that I will have, you know, signed pictures on my wall of, currently don't have one, but Shogun can go right up there. Shogun BMF, you know what I mean? Shogun Hall of Famer, like, but that wasn't the Shogun that was Shogun with like a bunch of knockout losses, completely done. The Volkan Oezdemir fight, I give him credit for, but this is kind of one of the common themes with Anthony Smith. He's kind of like a comeback fighter, kind of like the Chito Vera of like 205 in a way, but more like kind of more of a journeyman. Kind of takes that ass whooping up front, and then you start to fatigue from whooping on him, and then he has some sneaky stuff for you. Like the way he beat Volkan and Gustafsson, and by the way, Gustafsson was also washed at the time, but still, he beat those guys the exact same way. Takes the ass whooping up front, drags them in deep waters, finishes them. But man, I feel like since then, he's just been taking stupid damage. The Glover Teixeira fight was hard to watch. Granted, he was able to go on a 3-fight win streak after that, but Devin Clark, I know people have a love affair betting that guy for whatever weird reason, but I've always thought the guy.
Not me.
Not me either. If y'all listen after about it, y'all know how I feel about that. Jimmy Crute, man, it's too bad. Well, it's not too bad for Jamal, but it's too bad what Jamal did to Crute, because Crute never came back the same ever again after what Jamal did to him. And then Ryan Spann, you know, Ryan Spann is one of the biggest talented flakes we've ever seen, right? Mm-hmm. Like you saw that fight last week against Bogdan. Like Ryan Spann, like will look like a world champion, and then he gets hit once, or he doesn't finish you instantly, and then he collapses. And the Johnny Walker fight I was at, it was in Greenville or Charlotte or something. And like, wasn't like Anthony having flashbacks to like his home invasion. Like he was telling Johnny, like, you're like attacking my family. Like, didn't he say some like weird shit like that? Like, dude, like, and then the Ryan Spann rematch, I kind of thought he got a little lucky there, but again, back to Ryan Spann kind of being, a physical freak, but not the brightest. So first round, clear Anthony Smith. Second round, Ryan Spann beats the dog shit out of him. And then Ryan Spann kind of takes his foot off the gas. In that third round, I thought Ryan Spann landed the more meaningful strikes, but I will concede this, that Anthony Smith outlanded him. Anthony Smith outpointed him. It just comes down to, do you favor the volume of Anthony in round 3, or do you favor the better shots of Spann in round 3? And then the Khalil fight, very tough to watch. So I think Anthony's at that point now where, dude, 37-19. And again, that's all we know about Weezy. We don't know about the 50 trailer parks fights he's had prior to that, right? So he's at that point where now, we're getting to the point where we're using your name to build up our prospects. And I think Vitor is going to come out here and shine. Just, I think he's rising to the occasion. I mean, it's minus 600. Doesn't take a genius to pick that. But unfortunately, at the betting window, probably is a dogger pass situation. I ain't laying no minus 600 because where's the value? Like if for him minus 600, I don't have the calculator in front of me, but like, don't you have to conclude that he like wins that fight? Like, don't you got to like line him like minus 900 to find value at minus 600 or something like that? Like, I'm sure someone can tell me the numbers. I don't have the
minus 600, Dan, is an implied probability of 85.71%. So yeah. I mean, like if you're looking for value, it's probably not going to be in that number,
Yeah. So how do you see this fight going down? I mean, you kind of favor the physicality of Petrino. Like, you think he's going to strike more? You think he's going to try to pick him up and slam him? Like, what do you think? Because I like that Petrino can finish early, but I like that Petrino can push 3 hard rounds through fatigue. And for a guy who, he's a young guy, right? Like, Petrino, like, how old is
26.
Petrino, bro? 26. He's just a kid. He's just a kid. And this guy's already on the trajectory to hit the top 10. And this is the perfect next step up in competition. But I always say it, Weezy, no one is exempt from that first L. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's first L time this weekend? Because Anthony Smith is known for handing some of those.
But he's not the guy on this card that's known for going out there and winning fights that he just shouldn't win. We're going to talk about that cat pretty soon. But Anthony Smith, like you said, like right now, Dan, there's a backyard somewhere in the state of Nebraska where Anthony Smith has fought more times than 30% of the UFC roster, Right. So this guy's been doing it forever. 56 fights. 415 minutes of his life in a cage, in his underwear, fighting 205 and 185 pound men. 21 UFC fights, a 12-9 UFC record. This guy, I mean, he's done it all, man. I mean, he's done it all. And the problem is that when you're young, you can have that style where you go out there and just get your ass beat and fight through it and then come out the other end because the other guy breaks trying to break you. But 56 fights into your career to have that style against this level of fighter at 205 pounds in the UFC, it's terrifying, right? And if you look at who he's beating right now, Anthony Smith, and it's no disrespect to Anthony Smith. The guy's a legend, right? I mean, we know that. All you got to do is look through his record. I mean, look at some of the names that he's beaten, and the guy's a legend. But this guy, this guy could be taken down by a cool breeze, by a cool Nebraska breeze. The guy would just be flat on his back like he got hit by a semi-truck. So, like, Ryan Spann should have been able to beat Anthony Smith by just taking him down, laying on top of him, and landing ground and pound. He didn't do that. Another guy with absolutely sub-zero fight IQ in Jimmy Crute goes out there and attempts 0 takedowns until his calf gets shut down. And then he shoots panic takedowns off of one
and he
leg.
Gets all of them.
And he gets them, Dan. He gets them. I laid juice on Jimmy Crute that night. I put about 4 holes in my wall being like, why is this prick not wrestling, But with a guy like Petrino, dude, he's gotten takedowns in every UFC fight. He's gotten a lot of control time in every UFC fight. And for a guy that is as big and as muscular as he is, he shouldn't be able to push the pace that he does. The pace of that Turk-Cali fight There had to be like 11 total takedowns and 7 total reverses in that fight. Those are 205-pound men, up, down, absorbing massive, significant strikes, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, up, down, just crazy pace. Petrino pushed through the whole thing and found himself in several bad positions that he got his way out of. He's younger than this guy. He hits harder than Anthony Smith. He's the much better wrestler. He's way more likely to win minutes in the grappling exchanges. The question is, does Vitor make a mistake? Because if he makes a mistake against this guy, Smitty is a guy that can make you pay for that mistake. One little mistake in a transition and you're in a triangle choke and it might be over. So laying -600 on Vitor, I mean, I there's no way I'm doing that, but I'm not taking the plus money shot on Smitty because I just think it's, if Petrino fights smart, he could just take this guy down, avoid the submission, and coast to a victory. He's also way more likely to land the big shots on the feet, in my opinion. So it should be Vitor all day here.
Now, next up in the middleweight division, we got a matchup between Michel Pereira. He's 30-11, taking on Ihor Potieria, who's 21-5. Currently, they got it. Michel Pereira, again, -600. The comeback on Ihor is +425. Exact same odds as the last fight. But this one I kind of view differently. Don't get me wrong. I do think Michel should be favored, of course, what he's accomplished, the kind of fighter he is, this and that. But I want to give Ihor a lot of credit, okay? Hear me out. Like, from the guy that first came into the UFC, firstly, on Contender Series, he was like a +300 dog or some shit like that. And he goes out there, gets that upset. And it kind of seemed like, firstly, how old is this kid? Like, he's just a kid too, right?
27.
27. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but that's now. When he came into the UFC, what, 25, 24, something like that. So, he's a guy who I think has been maturing a lot because you watch the Negumariano fight, you watch even the Shogun fight, and then you watch I was at the fight, the Olberg fight. It's kind of like, yeah, this dude's 100% washing out the UFC. But in that Bellato fight, dude, I saw a big improvement from Ihor Potieria. I saw a guy who's starting to feel more comfortable, who's starting to feel like, okay, I'm starting to pay my dues. I'm starting to feel like this is my home. And even if that fight didn't go his way, it could have been stopped. Like, he could have got a legit TKO win in that fight. Props to Bellato. That chin, Jesus, man. I mean, the fact that he was able to survive that. And then, so he parlays that performance. Even though it's a loss, I thought that was the best Ihor had ever looked up until that point, right? And then his next fight against that Robert guy, when he dropped to middleweight, like, dude, like, Ihor, like, he looked like a brand new man, like legit. Like, I was like, okay, Ihor, and he looks huge at 185 pounds. We got a former welterweight versus a former 205er, but don't let that fool you. Michel is a massive 185er. And I see why Stephen Wonderboy didn't want that fight. You know what I'm saying? But no, this is a big middleweight. And I think it's a guy that's making improvements. That's why I'm kind of sketched out about this price. Now, don't get me wrong. It could just be Michel coming out here and just doing what he does, doing what he did his last 2 fights against Andre and and Mikal. Oh my God, the way he ran through Mikal. Like, goddamn, dude. Like, oh my God. I was like, okay, Michel, like, we might be a future top 15 guy. Like, is he already a top 15 guy? Like,
I'm not sure I don't think he's there yet because it's only 2 fights, but he could. I mean, like,
let me look it up.
He finishes Ihor in the first round. He's gonna have a number next to his name with the performances that he's put on here at middleweight thus far, and with the line that's on the fight right now. He's being treated like a top 15 fighter. Okay,
so Mikal is not top 15, and neither is Michel at this point. But he's definitely on his way.
Yeah,
you keep putting on performances like that, you're on your way. The thing about it is, okay, because when you look at this fight and you look at the last fight, the Vitor Petrino Anthony Smith fight, and they're the exact same prices, Anthony Smith is like 1 or 2 fights away from retirement. This kid Ihor, his last 2 performances, we've been seeing a big step in the right direction. He's trending upwards. He's starting to feel like, okay, I'm not just the guy who's going to wash out. I am a guy who belongs. I am a guy who brings something to the table. and gets out of his comfort zone, is training in the United States. Like, I love to see stuff like that. So I'll be honest with you. Look, yeah, am I picking Michel? Sure. Michel, I think, is the better fighter, fought the better level of competition, proven more, whatever. But like, you can't act like Ihor has not looked significantly better his last 2 fights. And if you can parlay that and just take it to that next level this fight, I mean, I think shit could get interesting because look, Michel's last 2 fights were just very, very quick. Hits Petrosky once, Petrosky wanted out. Against Michal, again, very impressive, but it lasted, how long did that fight last? Like even a minute? You know what I'm saying? So like, I'm curious to see what, because Ihor looked good throughout 3 rounds, his last one against that Robert dude. Whereas like before, he'd gas out after 1 round, do the whole bit. So I see a guy in Ihor who's taking things seriously, who's leveling up, who feels like his confidence is gaining, and you do belong in the UFC. But, you know, Michel is on a top 15 trajectory. So that's what makes it intriguing. So yeah, I'm going to lean with Michel, but I'm going to keep it a buck as always. I think this is a dogger pass situation, Weezy. I don't think the Petrino fight might necessarily be. That's probably a pass. I think this might be a dogger pass situation. Again, I'm not saying Ihor's not going to get steamrolled, but I just can't look you in the eye with a straight face and tell you that I haven't acknowledged and witnessed and just taken note of the improvements Ihor's made his last 2 fights. Period.
Yeah, you know, Dan, one of the things that I've learned in life is that it's much easier to learn from your mistakes. You know, like when you make a mistake and you pay for it, you know, it kind of like stares you in the face, and it's hard to run from it, right? It's much easier in life if you can look at other people, look at the mistakes they made, and say, all right, I'm going to avoid those mistakes. And then because you take much less pain that way. But, you know, oftentimes it's the lessons that we learn personally that we take to heart the most. And like, I've bet against Ihor Potieria just about every damn time. I was calling him a fraud when he came into the UFC.
Same.
I cashed on Niga Mariano against him. I loved it. You know, I was saying that I was this close to betting Shogun Rua. If the guy wasn't a rotting corpse at the time that he took the Potieria fight. And I said when I broke down that fight, the UFC is giving Mauricio Shogun Rua the one guy on the roster that he can beat. Let's see if he can beat him. And he couldn't even beat him in Brazil. That's how washed he was. And then the Ulberg fight, I was like, this is the ass shaving of the year. He's going to murder this dude. And I remember in the Ulberg fight, Potieria looking just a little bit better than what I expected him to. Now, he still got knocked out, but I was still like, okay. Then the next time I'm out against Bellato, I'm like, oh, this is Uncle Weezy's ass shaving of the week. Bellato is going to destroy this dude. He's going to absolutely walk through him. And, you know, like, thank God we make our bets online these days instead of actually going to the casino. Because, like, in the first round, I would have been ripping up that ticket when I saw what Ihor was doing to Bellato. I can't believe that fight didn't get stopped. You know, it could have gotten stopped a couple of times, and we could be talking about a 2-fight winning streak and Potieria winning 3 out of his last 4 if that fight had been stopped, and it really could have been. But yeah, you know, when I bet against Potieria that time and cashed the bet, that's when I said, all right, Weezy, this guy's not a fraud anymore. That is not how a fraud fights. That dude went out there and absolutely put the pedal to the metal, and he showed a different side of himself there. And then he gets the win against Bricek, as you noted, and he looked like he could win minutes there as well, like actually bring a pretty decent game plan into the cage. And this kid's got 25 professional fights already. He's a former Sambo player and a very high-level one at that. So as we all have to learn from our mistakes, I'm starting to learn that this guy is a little bit better, or maybe even a lot better than what I thought he was coming into the UFC. So yeah, man, minus 600 on a guy like Pereira, who might still gas out doing a pre-fight dance routine. he had a pre-fight dance routine versus Alexandre, you know, and I mean, if he hadn't gotten
it was a hell of a dance. It was a hell of a dance.
It was great. It was great. It was as great as the performance inside the cage was the walkout, you know, and 61 seconds against Petrosky, 68 seconds against Alexandre. I mean, I'm not getting in Pereira's way right now, but here's the cheeky way I'm thinking about playing this one, right? Pereira has finished his last 2 fights in like a minute. But other than that, he's went to decision in most of his wins. Pereira's money line, minus 600. Pereira's decision line, plus 550. So if we're both agreeing that Ihor Potieria is better than what we thought he was and that he's making improvements, maybe he lasts the full 15 minutes against a guy that before the Petrosky fight, you'd have to go back to a bum named Zalim Imadayev to find the last time that this guy finished a fight. So might be a good plus EV way to get the Pereira side here. And if he does get a decision win, you're getting him at like 10% of the implied probability of what you have to pay in order to get him at his money line right now.
Now, kicking off the main card in the middleweight division, we got a matchup between Paul the Bear Jew Craig, he's 17-7, taking on Caio Borralho, who's 15-1, and currently they got it again, exact same odds as the last 2 fights, minus 600 Borralho, plus 425 Craig. And let's talk about it because look, Craig, I mean, when you have submission wins over Magomed Ankalaev, Jamal Hill, well, credit to my boy Hill, never tapped, try to punch him with that broken arm. Ref stepped in. That's why they called it a TKO and not a sub. But either way, when you have wins over Magomed Ankalaev, Jamal Hill, Kennedy, Nikita Krylov, like, hey, dog, like this dude's triangle is so stupid, like how good it is. But let me tell you something about Borralho. Damian Maia black belt, and check this out, in a pure grappling match that he had with Jailton Almeida, who's much larger than this man. Do you know how he lost that fight? I'll tell you. Don't look it up. Let me tell you.
I know how he lost it.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
He lost that fight via like one of those, like when you go through the whole match and they can't determine a winner, so they start doing the fast escape time bullshit. Yeah. Oh, so you know, Almeida had a faster escape, so they call him the winner. But the point I'm trying to make is if you can compete with a guy like Jailton, now, granted, that was pure grappling. There's no elbows. There's no punches. There's no kicks. I get it. But if you can compete in pure grappling with Jailton and you're that much smaller and you're a Damian Maia black belt, I would be very surprised if Paul Craig was able to come out here and submit you. And the issue is Paul Craig doesn't really have a plan B. Some of Paul Craig's opponents might have to take plan B, but Paul Craig doesn't have a plan B. And the thing about Borralho is he does. He's got kind of like that elusive karate style, kind of lower volume. And I think that should be enough. Keep this fight on the feet, kind of pick him apart a little bit. If you get a knockout, that's cool. If it's a decision, that's cool too. But I just see Borralho being the more well-rounded fighter here. And the one area where Craig excels, I don't think will be a factor here. Watch it be a factor. Watch him get another ridiculous triangle choke, but not against someone with this level of jiu-jitsu. I'm going Borralho. I don't know if it's going to be a finish or not, but I'm going Borralho here. Just more path to victory. And he's a very cerebral guy. Got the glasses, the fight nerds. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm going to go Borralho here.
Yeah, I think Borralho by decision here. That's what I'm thinking. But, you know, you touched on it, right? If you're an undefeated fighter in the UFC, you shouldn't be taking fights against Paul Craig. What happened to Jamal Hill? You know, Magomed Ankalaev, Dan, would still be undefeated. He still is. The only loss on that man's record is Paul Craig. You know, Andre Muniz was 5-1 in the UFC. And the only reason he had lost a fight is because he fought like a complete moron against Brendan Allen and didn't try to grapple with him. You know, he tried to knock him out. He fancied himself a striker, comes into the Paul Craig fight, gets knocked out in the 3rd round, out-grappled by Paul Craig. I mean, you can't lay minus 600 on Borralho here. But I think what you can do is you can maybe take his decision prop, because this guy has only finished Mihail Oleksiejczuk at this level, who has no ground game. Paul Craig is the kind of guy, like I was watching, what fight was it? The Brendan Allen fight. Also the Nikita Krylov fight. Paul can stay in fights just annoying you. He'll lock down one of your legs, grab a wrist, and then just kind of wait and rock back and forth and look for that sweep. And then if he gets his guard back, then now you got to worry about him slapping that triangle on. And he just kind of annoys you when he stays there. I think a lot of people think Caio's going to finish him, and I could absolutely see Caio wanting to get a finish here in front of the live crowd in Brazil. But I think Caio's going to win this one by decision. And right now, the money line on Caio is, what did we say? Was it minus 600 again?
Yes, sir.
But the decision props plus 200.
Fuck it. Try it.
I mean, like, Caio has got 5 UFC wins, and 4 of them are by decision. Now, Paul Craig gets finished in almost all of his losses, but look at who he's losing to, you know? I mean, he's losing to guys that finish fights all the time. That's not Caio. So I think if you're on that Caio side, a way to get the price of that line from minus 600 down to plus 200 or better is just to say, well, let's hope he doesn't finish it inside the distance.
Now, main event of the prelims, we got Joanderson and Brito. He's 16-3, taking on Jack Shore, who's 17-1. Currently, they got it. Joanderson and Brito minus 160. The comeback on Jack Shore is plus 140. And I think the big difference here is the physicality, right? Like, we're talking about a former bantamweight in Shore, and then a guy in Brito who, like, for him to make bantamweight, like, he's going to end his career at 55s. You know what I'm saying? This guy is physical. This guy is, and you remember Dana White talking about on Contender Series, like, this could be the next big Brazilian star, and like, he could be undefeated in the UFC. Like, you watch his fight with Bill Algeo, the only one he lost in the UFC, and it literally came down to like one scramble at the very end of the third round. It's 1-1 going to round 3. Literally comes down to like the last minute. I think Algeo is able to take his back and kind of ride it out. 29-28 decision. Besides that, man, the guy's been on fire. And even prior to that, you know who he beat on Contender Series, right? The guy who's on a fucking tear of tears, Diego Lopez. And, you know, I know there was a little controversial ending and whatnot, but Brito was clearly winning that fight. So Brito's a problem. And the thing with Jack Shore, I like Jack Shore a lot. I mean, let's not act like this guy is some kind of, you know, like, this dude was like 5-1 in the UFC, 5-1 or 6-1. Let them hold on. 1, 2, 3,
6-1.
6-1 in the UFC. Like, this is a legit dude. But the thing about it is, I think featherweight, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't he kind of look kind of pudgy and kind of fat against Makwan Amirkhani and whatnot? And the thing about that, man, that fight, so this is what's interesting. That fight was all the way back in March of last year. So now my question for you, Weezy, unless you know about him having a surgery or him being injured, like, my question is, okay, so you saw how he looked physically speaking. Taking a full year off, like, do you think he's been, like, maybe focusing on that strength and conditioning, you know, kind of getting rid of those love handles? Like, do you think maybe we can kind of see a more ripped Jack Shore that's kind of growing into this weight class? Because if he looks like he did against Amirkhani, I think he's going to get smoked here. But the thing is, you take a full year off to just work on your strength and conditioning. Like, have you seen any pictures of him on Instagram? I haven't. So I don't know if all of a sudden, you know, no more USADA testing. Now this guy's going to come out here looking like the Incredible Hulk. But even then, the physicality difference is so large here. I mean, Joanderson has got that one-hitter quitter. Joanderson can take your back and choke you out. And let's talk about that Pierce fight, because people only talk about, and because rewatching it, my memory of what happened and then what actually happened were two completely different things, Weezy. Like, I thought, oh, Pierce was arrogant and he was like, get up, boy, and this and that. Oh, and then he gets choked out. But actually, Joanderson was talking shit to Pierce the whole time. Like, I think Pierce said to the ref, like, oh, he's grabbing my glove. I don't know what he said, something like that. And then Joanderson's like, ruh, 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 ruh. He's like talking shit to him. So
that's like, what happened. Yeah.
He's like fucking with him a little bit. And then I think Pierce says one more thing. And then Joanderson starts making those sounds again, like taunting him. So that kind of pissed Pierce off. And it's like, Pierce was like, okay, fuck it. Get up, boy. And then he just happened to get choked out. But people make it seem like Pierce just got arrogant and Pierce just, you know, said that for no reason. He didn't say that for no reason. Like, Joanderson was taunting him and was kind of like, you know, was making fun of him a little bit. That's kind of got him off his game. But Joanderson, like I said, well-rounded. He can pick you up and slam you, can choke you out, can knock you out. I mean, that plus 250 I cashed against Feely, one of my all-time favorite bets. And I love the trajectory. It's just back to Shore. Like I said, he looked fat against Makwan. He looked terrible in that fight in round 1. But just get Makwan past round 1, you're going to win the fight. Like, again, we talk about this often. I say this like quote, if you haven't figured out how to beat X fighter, then there's a problem. And with Makwan, just weather the first round storm and you beat him. Like, even on the regionals, you saw Makwan on all the Garden of Life fruits and vegetables in his regional. The same thing happened, Weezy. Yeah. Strong first round, done in round 2. So, Jack Shore did what he was supposed to do. So the big question, like I said, what kind of leaps have you made in your physicality in this year off? Like, are we, like I said, is this dude going to come out with a fucking like 6-pack jack, no more love handles, or not, and even if he does that, will it make a difference? Because the physicality of Brito is something to know. So I'm going Brito here, man, just because I know more and I think he's got a higher ceiling. I think that Shore's probably in the wrong weight class, but let me see what Shore looks like on the scales on Friday. I'm very intrigued by that.
Yeah, so I'm kind of seeing this fight the same way, and it's weird because I parlayed up Joanderson Brito earlier in the week at -170, and he went all the way down to -140.
Right.
And I was like, man, what am I missing here? Because first of all, if you really take a deep look into Jack Shore's UFC record, you're going to realize that this dude hasn't beaten anybody. I don't care if you beat Makwan Amirkhani. That guy is awful. He is absolutely awful. And Makwan's going to have moments against people in the first round. That's just, he's that good for 5 minutes. But from there, okay, you beat Makwan. Don't care. Got subbed by Ricky Simon after getting dropped by him. Timur Valiev is by far his best win. And that was a very close fight after 2 rounds, but he had a great 3rd round against Timur and probably almost got him out of there. Dropped him twice. Looked phenomenal. Then before that, he beats Ludovic Shalinian, Hunter Azure. I think his UFC debut was against Nohelin Hernandez. And there's one other fight that I'm missing in there, but it's a win that I think is against the guy who had 0 UFC wins. So now you're moving up a weight class. You're fighting a guy in Brito who could send you to the hospital in so many different ways, that it's pretty terrifying. I mean, this guy could, knock your brain sideways. He could twist your leg in half. He could break your arm in half. He can make you, tap to a choke. There are so many different ways that Joanderson Brito could just send you to the hospital and be like, why did I take that fight? I mean, you look at the fights, right, Dan? Bill Algeo in your fucking debut. So they're believing in this kid, right? And he beats Diego Lopez on Dana White's Contender Series. Then they give him like an almost 20-fight veteran in Andre Philly. He sleeps that fool in a minute. And then and then you got guys who are smart who are like, oh, I'm pulling out of the Joanderson Brito fight. And then he fights Lucas Alexander. And then I don't know who pulled out against Brito the next time, and they fed him Weston Wilson. And then Jonathan Pierce takes the fight. And I think Pierce probably lost the first round of that fight. He's definitely winning the second up until he got caught in that ninja choke. So I think Brito, and here's the other thing, right? Looking how the judging's been lately, Dan. Are the judges scoring grappling? Are they scoring crotch sniffing and cage control? Because that's a lot of Jack Shore's game, And I think the reason people are betting on Shore is they're looking at the fact that Brito was losing to Pierce there and being controlled, that he did lose to Algeo because he lost some scrambles and minutes on the ground in that fight. And they're saying, well, Shore does that. Well, yeah, Shore does that against Nohelin Hernandez. Shore does that against Hunter Azure and Ludovic Sholinian. Joanderson Brito out-grappled Diego Lopez, I'm surprised that Jose Chepe Mariscal is still alive after he fought Joanderson. I mean, like, there was like a prayer circle around him on the ground. And when he woke up like a minute later after that knockout, it looked like there was a demon in him and he didn't know where he was. He was crying and shit and pushing his own cornermen away. Like, dude, this guy Brito, man. I mean, like, Cody Durden brought it up earlier, right? When we were talking about the main event. And he was saying, this fight isn't priced like it's a mismatch, but it's a mismatch, right? Because we just talked about 3 fights in a row with minus 600 favorites, right? And I think like Brito maybe loses some minutes of this fight, but I think Brito is going to look minus 600 when this fight is over. And I think it could be the same for Pantoja. So Brito is a guy I think is underpriced this week on a week when you got a lot of people that are overpriced. And the same thing with Alexandre Pantoja.
Is that your ass shaving of the week?
It's not official yet. It's not official, and I am not committing to anything yet because it's been a crazy week for me thus far. So I'm pushing back my show to Thursday afternoon. So I still have to write up 2 more fights. Then I'm gonna get out my abacus and all my charts, and it's gonna look like that dude from A Beautiful Mind when he was losing his mind. That's what happens in the office here when I'm
my boy Russell
shaving of the week. Yeah.
Hey, but it's a candidate. It's a candidate.
Definitely a candidate, man, because it's a better priced line. You know, you don't want to give somebody an ass shaving of the week. But like, I'm telling you, this dude who's minus 700 is winning this week. You know,
right,
nobody needs to hear that shit.
Nobody wants to.
Yeah.
All right. Next up in the strawweight division, this is really intriguing to me, especially with this big line. We got Karolina Kowalkiewicz. She's 16-7, taking on Iasmin Lucindo, who's 15-5. Currently, they got it. Iasmin Lucindo minus 400. Weezy. The comeback on Karolina Kowalkiewicz is plus 330. Now, real quick, I want to point something out. So, off the top of your head, do you know what the age difference is here? Don't look it up.
I mean, I'm looking right at my sheet though, so I know what it is because it's right in front of me.
17-year age gap. Now, do you know what the numbers say? Has there ever been a 17-year age gap?
Probably a couple of times, but I mean, it does not happen often, obviously.
We talk 10 years. Okay. Yeah. 17. Like, dude, that's almost fucking 2 decades. Goddamn. But with those 2 decades come a lot of experience. I mean, we're talking about someone in Karolina Kowalkiewicz who, anytime she fights, I will bring up the fact that when she cashed that plus 215 for me against Rose Namajunas, shout out to my girl Karolina in Atlanta, Georgia, of all places. So,
wow.
Much love, Karolina. I'll always be a fan. And just the way she carries herself. When she fought Joanna for the title and she rocked her in that 4th round, had her on, I don't know if in 2024 I can name the street she was on, but
no, you can't anymore.
She was on that. She was on a street she didn't know the name of. Let's word it like that. But so look, I think Iasmin Lucindo is extremely talented. Only 22 years old. She's been fighting since she was a teenager. And when you watch that UFC debut she had against Yasmin Yeragui, because you remember at the time, a lot of people were complaining, like, why are they putting the chicks like as the featured bout? And then you saw damn well why they put the chicks as the featured bout, because they went out there, they were banging it out. The only reason, Weezy, that didn't win fight of the night was because right after that was Nate Landwehr versus David Onama. You understand what I'm saying? So that's literally the only reason. And then after that, I mean, you see what she's been doing. Now, listen, we don't have to talk about beating up, people named Brogan or anything like that. But the Polyana Viana submission was nice. But like Yasmin Yeragui, who I respect, Brogan Walker, Polyana Viana, like Karolina's a level she's never seen before, ever. I mean, Karolina, like I said, Karolina beat Rose Namajunas. Karolina fought Joanna for a title. Like Karolina has been there, done that. It's just about where's she at? She's 38 years old. She's closer to the end than to the beginning, but she's gotten her confidence back, because when she was on that 5-fight skid, we thought, okay, yeah, dude, this shit is over with. And some of the people she lost to, like, no disrespect to Panay or to Michelle Watterson, but like the Karolina I knew and loved would have beat both of them. But the fact that she got out of her comfort zone in Poland, moved to ATT, now she's on a nice little 4-fight win streak, granted against softer competition, but this is how you get a fighter's confidence back. This is how you build them back up. And now, I don't want to say this is like a test, but this is a tougher fight than the last couple of people she's faced. But dude, look at the numbers Karolina's been putting up these last few fights. Weezy, 141 significant strikes landed her last fight, 139 the fight prior. Like, these are numbers that even in Iasmin Lucindo's incredible fight with Yeragui, she only landed 66 strikes. So like, dude, I'm not saying Karolina's going to win, but what I'm saying is, out of like all the massive favorites, This is the one I'd be the most sketched out about. Like, again, I think Lucindo is extremely talented, 22 years old, has a bright future. I do think she'll be a ranked fighter one day if she's not already, but like, this is like, she's never seen this before. So how do you kind of view Karolina's current state? And in her current state, do you think she can set back a young prospect in Lucindo, who, if she does get set back, she'll bounce back? She's 22. Like, imagine her when she's 25, you know? Like, sometimes you got to take these vet lessons and these learning experience, and you come back better for them. So I think this is a dogger pass situation, my man. This one, I think it's dogger pass all day.
Yeah, so, Karolina Kowalkiewicz is on a 4-fight winning streak, So, yeah, I mean, to get her at the price that you're getting her at right now, with the experience advantage, with the volume advantage, with the strength of schedule advantage, those are all really, compelling reasons to bet an underdog. And, one of the things that I bring up that's not really in the stats is, can Karolina Kowalkiewicz? You look at some of these fights she's losing, she's out there looking like an Irishman, pale as the day is long, and then you go into the Felice Herrig fight, and it looks like she's been tanning on the beaches of Sao Paulo for the last 6 months. She goes out there and destroys her. She beats Silvana Gomez Juarez. She beats Vanessa Demopoulos. She beats Diana Belbita, all times coming into the cage looking like, a silver screen version of George Hamilton, with that tan. It's just beautiful, right? But the other things that matter here, Dan, are the volume. 16.4 distance strike attempts per minute. She lands 6.3 of them. That's 1.2 more than the divisional average. She's throwing a ton of volume. She's only been knocked down once in 16 UFC fights, so she's very durable. She's fought the much better brand of competition, and I think that this is going to be a boxing match. So, yeah, man, Karolina Kowalkiewicz by decision. I think that that's a pretty good number this week, and you're getting the more experienced fighter. You're getting the lady who does more, who's fought the much better brand of competition. We know more about her, and if she comes to that scale on Friday looking like George Hamilton again, I might be sprinkling that decision prop just a little bit, because the number is going to be huge, and it's probably going to have my interest.
So, official pick?
Official pick, Iasmin Lucindo by decision, because the hometown, because of the years younger. But it's important to remember, we're betting numbers. We're not betting fighters. When you look at that age advantage, 10 years or more, about 66, 67% for the younger fighter. But the implied probability of that is, the betting, when you convert that to a betting line, you're getting minus 200, right? So the baseline is Lucindo minus 200 if you're handicapping it based on age. But there's all these other things that come in. Experience in favor of Kowalkiewicz. Volume in favor of Kowalkiewicz. Strength of schedule in favor of Kowalkiewicz. If there's not a big grappling advantage on the Lucindo side, we might be looking at a bet that gamblers like us would consider plus EV here.
You know what, man? I'm gonna go out on a limb. I'm not confident, but I'm gonna pick Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Let's see what happens. Like, don't quote me on it. Don't go big on it. But I'm gonna go out on a limb. Let's see what happens.
Let's go.
Split decision. Now, next up in the lightweight division, we got a fantastic matchup between Elves Brenner. He's 16-3, taking on Myktybek Oralbai, who's 12-1. And currently, they got it. Myktybek Oralbai minus 250. The comeback on Elves Brenner is plus 200. So I love this fight. This is great, because Elves Brenner, like I said, my boy Gomis gave him the Rookie of the Year last year, I'm pretty sure. And like the fights that dude took, like Zubaira to Kuga, like in your debut, you know what I'm saying? You edge out that split. Then you go in there against Guram, who like everyone is saying like, oh, this is the next this is the next that. He's Hamzat's training partner, this and that. Dude, like they got into a dog fight and the dog won, and then handled that short notice guy how you're supposed to handle a short notice guy, flatlined him, and trains out of the shoot the box camp. I like a lot of things about him. And then with Myktybek, Oralbai, like, dude, when he made his debut, like it was just so evident that this guy's gonna have a bright future in the UFC. Like he's got so many things that he brings to the table. First of all, he's only 25. He's just a kid too. And what I'm about to say, I don't want people to take the wrong way. I actually mean this as a compliment. He's kind of like Neanderthalistic in a way, like the way he looks and his physicality and the way that he's just fucking going forward the whole time and doesn't get deterred, has a hell of a chin on him. Because the first couple minutes of that Medic fight, dude, Medic was landing some shots that like you saw Medic land one punch on Tim Means, game set match, and the shots he was landing on Oralbai, like, damn, like Oralbai's got a chin, and Oralbai is relentless, man. When he get his fucking wrestling is ridiculous. But I want to say this. This is where I have questions. Okay, so check it out. Let me pull up the stats real quick, right? So you look at that fight that Oralbai had with Medic, right? He attempts 10 takedowns, which is something we love, Weezy, and he gets 7 of those takedowns. But let me say something. And that fight only lasted less than 2 rounds. So what that means is that Medic was able to get up a lot. Medic got up at least 5 or 6 times. The issue was Medic wasn't able to create any separation. Medic was already fatigued, after stuff in the first few, that he'd be able to get back up, couldn't create separation, right back down. My question here is, okay, so I'm going to concede the fact that I think Oralbai is going to come out here and take down Brenner. We can agree on that. That's probably going to happen. But if Medic can get up, I think Brenner can get up. Here's my question. Can Brenner create separation when he gets up? Because that's what Medic was not able to do easy. Medic could not create any separation whatsoever. Can Brenner do that? Because Brenner is a dog. Brenner will dig deep. Brenner comes from a camp that's very well-rounded. But Brenner, the physicality difference here is big. This kid, Oralbai, looked jacked at welterweight. What's he going to look like at 55? And he doesn't strike me as a guy who's going to miss weight, he's locked the fuck in, Where's this dude from, first of all? Let me take a look. Kyrgyzstan, so Valentina Shevchenko, Rafael Fiziev, Rafael Fiziev, I feel is from 3 different places. Isn't he from Azerbaijan and you're muted, my dog.
Sorry, yeah, you're right though. He's from 3 different countries.
He's from Azerbaijan, Kyrgyzstan, but either way, what I'm trying to say is Oralbai is a beast, dude, and he's got a very, very bright future. He's also a young kid, 26 years old, and I like what I've seen, man. I mean, he's gone out there. You saw that knockout he had against the dude with did the dude have pink gloves or long ass hair and shit? I know that guy was nothing special, but he handled him like he was nothing special, right? So
yeah,
I think this kid's got a bright future. It just comes down to me stylistically speaking, right? I have to, kind of bring up what I just brought up. Medic was able to get up 5 times. Medic couldn't create separation. Uncle Weezy, will Elvis Brenner create separation? Because you have to make a guy like Oralbai work. If you just let him get off on his game plan, I mean, he's going to grind you out. He's going to finish you. He's going to dominate you. He's going to wilt you. He's going to gas you out. But you have to make a guy like that work. Can Brenner make him work? Brenner's made a lot of guys work. Look at Guram. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be able to get separation. This guy Oralbai is glue. Oralbai is actually Kyrgyzstani for glue. That's what this guy does. I mean, I'm telling you, I don't know the language, but it's got to be because the way and I'll just say it. You can crucify me if you want. This guy,
I won't.
This guy, he fights exactly like Khabib Nurmagomedov. Go watch the Jalen Fuller fight. He gets all of his takedowns, Dan, against the cage, right? Right when he comes out, he's pressuring, just like Nurmagomedov did. He wouldn't let you take forward steps for fear that you're going to walk into a reactive double leg. He gets you backed up to that cage. He waits until you're backed up. He uses the pressure to back you up. Then when you're backed up, he uses the striking to set up the entry on the takedown. Once he gets the entry on the takedown, it doesn't matter if the first one hits or not. He's going to get his hands locked. He might get you down. You might get right back up, but you're getting mat returned, and he just sticks on you. It reminds me of every Khabib Nurmagomedov fight I've ever seen when I watch Myktybek when he fights the way that he normally fights. Now, in those LFA fights, he said that he wanted to show off his striking a little bit more. He wanted to show that he wasn't one-dimensional. So we saw him actually resist the urge in the Elizario fight to shoot takedowns when he normally would have. But this guy, the way that he sets up his wrestling is exactly how you want to see it done. Pressure, use the striking to set up the entries on the takedowns and enter on those takedowns up against the fence so that when you get the takedowns and your opponent is down, no matter how good their Brazilian jiu-jitsu is, their head is up against that cage and they're never going to submit you. That's how Oralbai fights. So I would ask the gamblers out there that are looking to take that Brenner dog shot, right? What kind of a fighter do you think is going to be a minus 255 favorite over a guy who's 3-0 thus far in the UFC, fighting at home in Brazil, wins over Guram Kutateladze and Zubaira Tukugov? What kind of a fighter is going to be minus 255 over Elvis Brenner? It might be the kind of fighter who looks minus 500 after this fight is over because of the suffocating style that this dude fights with. It would be awesome, Dan, if Elvis Brenner could make this into an Elvis Brenner fight, because then it might be one of the best wars we've ever seen, because this guy Oralbai, he's got a great chin, and so does Elvis Brenner. Neither one of these guys has ever been finished, right? So if Brenner is able to make this dude work, if he is able to get separation, if we're able to see 6-7 minutes of distant striking exchanges, this fight could be the best fight on the card by a mile. But this guy Oralbai has the exact combination of attributes and fight style that I'm actually willing to lay juice on, and I am not willing to lay juice on a lot of fighters. But this guy Oralbai might be one of the ones that I'm willing to do it on this week, because that style is just a nightmare to deal with.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, you have the official pick is Oralbai. I think that Brenner's path is a comeback victory. Like take that ass whooping up front, not ass whooping, but take that grind, that wrestling grind up front. And again, we're just assuming that Oralbai is going to come out here and try to wrestle, but Duke can bang too. Like, do not sleep on his knockout power, but that's where you give kind of Elvis Brenner more chances to win. But if Brenner can make this guy work, get it into those deep waters, maybe a comeback finishes on the card. But yeah, official pick is going to be Oralbai here, man. He just got so many dominant qualities and attributes that I think are going to take him far in the sport. And shout out to Brenner for the run he's been on, because when he came into the UFC, he was a huge dog in a couple of those fights, and people didn't think this guy had a bright future. So to get a rookie of the year and come out here now back in Brazil, I love stories like that. I love seeing stuff like that. And yeah, but this guy Oralbai looks like the good. So let's see. I'm excited. Now, next up in the featherweight division, we got a matchup between Gene the Dog Silva. Let's see if he actually has a real nick. Lord Assassin. Yeah, we can go Lord Assassin. Why not? Fuck it. He's 12-2, taking on William Gomis, who's 13-2. Currently, they got it. Oh, wow. It's like a pick 'em now.
Yeah.
Well, a pick 'em with a slightly on Gene, minus 115 Gene, minus 105 Gomis. So Gene, I love guys like Gene who walk out rough. Like, dude, like, and the way he walks people down, his heart, his balls, his power, I like guys that fight like that. If he has a long career in the UFC, he'll end up on my wall too. You know what I'm saying? Like, guys that fight like him, like, and it sucks because as a gambler, you don't want to be biased towards the guys you enjoy watching fight, but Gomis is like the opposite. What's interesting is like Gene is like the big risk taker, and Gomis is like the ultimate play it safe guy. And we've seen a lot of matchups like this recently. Rakic versus Yuri on a much higher scale, of course, former champion versus a top 5 guy, but Rakic, the ultimate play it safe guy, versus Yuri, who's God of War type guy, right? Like, and Gene Silva, I see Gene Silva is going to be the one pushing the pace. Gene Silva is going to be the one with the output. It's just about, we talk about how the volume is very low on the Gomis side, but to give him credit, his defense is great. Like, he's a very hard guy to hit. He's very elusive. He's long. So he brings a lot of great attributes to the table. But if Gene can make him fight, like, let's not play some bullshit point battle where this guy's running around and and then you're like, putting your hands up in the air, like, come on, fight me. Like, as long as Gene, like, has his head on straight, which it seems like he does, and is able to cut off the cage, not let this guy run, and not let him, get off on, 1 strike per minute type shit. I think Gene can out-volume this guy and kind of break him down the stretch. So, yeah, I'm going Gene Silva here for the win.
I got a bet on Gomi. I got him at plus 135, though, and I missed the plus 145 that was available for a little while there. I really like William Gomi's striking, Dan. The thing that I think he's getting a little bit of a bad reputation of his fights being low volume and stuff, which they are. But if you watch the way that he strikes, he's not running. He's actually standing right in front of Francis Marshall and in his debut fight, he fought Jarno Aarons, standing right in front of these guys. But what he does is he's constantly feinting. And he's a southpaw, and his kicks are really good, man. He's got that Sanda background, which is another sport similar to kind of Sambo, where you've got striking and grappling involved. So it's not a bad base for MMA. But this guy's size is very big for the division. And I think his power is a little bit underrated just because he hasn't really flashed it yet in the UFC. Man, when he throws those head kicks, dude, they get up there fast and they're accurate. And his body shots, too, being a southpaw, he's going to land a liver shot one of these days. When you watch the Francis Marshall fight, after the first round of that fight, Marshall goes back to his corner. He's got Kurt Pellegrino's cornering him. And Kurt goes, all right, how you feeling? And Marshall's got his eyes are this big, and he goes, I can't find this guy. I can't hit him. And he's all, well, calm down. Here's what we're going to do. He goes, I can't find him. This guy Gomis is good, man. I mean, and he's won some minutes with his grappling too. But what we saw and what we remember is Francis Marshall getting him down in the third round and winning some minutes with the grappling there and actually coming close to finishing him. But as long as this fight is on the feet, Gomis, I think, is going to be doing the better work here. I think we've seen Gene Silva actually be a little bit patient. He looks for the big shot and he finds it almost all the time, but he will be patient looking for it. And patience can turn into frustration against a fighter that fights like Gomi does, because Gomi's always waiting to counter, and he's got that left hand just cocked up and ready to go, coming straight down the pipe. You have to worry about the kicks, and you have to worry about the constant feints, because it's very clear what he's trying to do. He's trying to get you to throw first, and he's trying to take your head off with a kick or a straight left in return with a counter. So I think Gomi's going to frustrate him at range. I think Gomi, being the taller, bigger, longer guy, might be the guy that's more willing or more able to actually slow down the fight should he want to, win some minutes in the clinch, maybe get a takedown. So I like on the money line side, even though it's even now, I still think Gomi should be a slight favorite in this fight due to the experience advantage and how well-rounded he is, the size advantage, and I think his striking is severely underrated.
Fair enough. Nice little head-to-head. This should be fun, my man. And it's going to be a great fight. I don't think that these guys are going to be making the crowd boo or humping. Like a Gene Silva fight, no one's going to be booing. And the thing I like about it is he's going to make Gomis fight. And Gomis is a very good counter striker, to your point, and he's got those physical attributes for a weight class like featherweight. So I'm excited. I'm excited for that. So let's see what happens. Now, next up in the lightweight division, we got a matchup between Joaquim Neto BJJ Silva. He's 13-4, taking on Drakkar Klose, who's 14-2. Currently, they got it. Drakkar Klose minus 175. The comeback on Joaquim Silva is plus 150. What do you think? Because Joaquim Silva, he might not be the fastest guy, but he's got that one-hitter quitter, and he'll surprise you with his jiu-jitsu. I know the name's Neto BJJ, and he's known for going out there and banging, but watch that Jared Gordon fight. People only remember that he knocked him out in the third round, but what about that knee bar from the back that he hit on him? I always fucking forget how to pronounce the name. The Siluev stretch. Did I get it right on my first shot? Let's go. Yeah, he hit him with that Siluev stretch, and I think he tore some shit on him there, and he's had some good performances, man. The way he handled Ronson. Dude, by the way, have you seen Ronson on his regionals recently? Like the kind of Flintstone vitamins, the kind of garden of life fruits and vegetables this guy's been harvesting. Oh my God. And then I thought Joaquim had a great showing against Arman Sarukian, who's about to fight for a title on like a week notice. Like you won a round and he wobbled him like, hey, dog, respect. And Drakkar, super, super physical, but no pun intended. I say this every fight, but every close fight is close. That's just the bottom line. So how do you kind of see this one going down?
Yeah, so, on 14 fight weeks, there are always going to be fights that kind of go by the wayside for you in terms of you're going to spend more time researching certain fights than others. And that's the way I feel here, because when I look at this line, I think of a guy like Klose, who you said he's always in close fights, and that's something that people have been saying that for a very long time, and they're saying it because it's true, So that's not the kind of fighter, the fighters that live in the margins and win split decisions, you don't want to lay minus 177 on them, right? Is that something you enjoy doing?
No.
No, I don't either. Also, I don't enjoy laying money on a dog when I get the feeling going into that fight that shit could go tits up so fast. And we don't have to look back that far to see Joaquim Silva getting knocked out in the first round by Ricky Glenn.
Why you got to bring up old shit?
And that's the problem, right? I mean, because Ricky Glenn looked awful the next two times in the cage, and it was him getting knocked out. And the fact that happened was scary, but they were both coming off of long layoffs. That was a weird fight. But yeah, I'm not laying the juice on a guy like Klose who lives in the margins. And I don't want to take the dog money on Silva because I can't count on him to grapple when I know that he's got a grappling advantage. I know that he's going to be patient and wait for that one big shot. And if you're doing that against a guy like Klose, you might just lose the minutes up until they tell you, oh, hey, 15 minutes are up. Let's see what the judges think. And then, 29-28, you lose. So this is one of those fights that I'm going to definitely stay away from, man. I don't even know. I mean, I think my official pick is Klose by decision, but I'm staying away.
Man, another one where, like I said, every close fight, when you're laying minus 170 on a guy who I get he's got a couple, recent finishes, but you got to put context. When you slam Joe Solecki, who, he wants to pull guard, he wants to, play his jiu-jitsu game. I respect the slam, beautiful knockout, but what is Joaquim about to pull guard here? I highly doubt it. Rafa Garcia, that was a great win. Rafa's been doing his thing lately. Brandon Jenkins killing it in bare knuckle, I think, but not quite UFC level. So the guys that Drakkar finishes, it's few and far between. Joaquim has been chin checked more than once. Like you mentioned, the Glenn fight, even prior to that, the Hackbrass fight, but man, I think he's got skills. My only issue with Joaquim historically is he's kind of slow. Like you look at his physique, the guy's stupid ripped. Every time you see him on the scales, you're like, oh yeah, this guy's gonna fuck someone up. And then he's just in this. He'll be a guy who will go to the center of the octagon and point down Max Holloway style and just fucking chug bungalows. And I love watching him fight. If this was at the Apex, I'd be a little bit more confident about Drakkar kind of squeaking by. But in Brazil, anytime that Joaquim lands something, the crowd's gonna go crazy. No one, people are gonna be dead silent, radio silent when Drakkar lands. So I'm not confident on it, but I'll lean with the underdog with Joaquim Silva. So let's see what happens. But you got to take into account the physicality of a guy like Drakkar. He's so physical. He can push you up against the fence. He's got some kind of low-key underrated calf kicks too. And do you remember, I think it was his debut when he beat the living shit out of that Devin Powell guy. It was as bad of a whooping as you can get without finishing someone. It was crazy. It was he just beat up a punching bag. So Drakkar has been doing his thing, man. And I'm a big fan of Joaquim as well. I'm gonna lean with Joaquim, kind of edge it out in Brazil, but I wouldn't put it past there to be a finish in this fight either. The way that, from time to time, styles make fights, and the way that Drakkar was banging with Beneil, if he bangs with Joaquim here, someone might hit the deck. So this should be fun. Now, next up in the lightweight division, we got a matchup between Mauricio Ruffy, is 9-1, taking on Jamie Mullarkey, who's 17-7 currently. They got at Mauricio Ruffy minus 200. The comeback on Jamie Mullarkey's plus 170. Dude, can you believe Dana said that Mauricio Ruffied that guy? When he was talking, did you hear that?
I did not hear that, dude.
On Contender Series. So I always talk about this, right? So I watched the fight, and then at the end, I'll skip to the end and hear why did Dana sign or not sign this guy? Like, what was his opinions on it? And what was Ruffy's opponent's name? It was this Russian guy. The Russian guy that he beat Impa Magomedov or some shit.
Magomedov, yeah.
Yeah. He said, I think he said something like Magomedov got roofied. Like, I was like, oh, damn, Dana. I don't remember the exact quote, so don't fucking sue me. But he said something like, yeah, like Buddy got roofied. I was like, damn. Man. But the thing about Ruffy, so firstly, had that fight never finished, Magomedov, it would have either been a split decision win for Magomedov or a draw, depending if you consider that last round to be a 10-8 or not. But Magomedov was up on 2 cards, 2-0 going into the third.
Wow.
So,
okay.
Yeah. And then one judge had it 1-1. So if the third round was 10-9, Ruffy would have lost the split. If the third round was 10-8, it would have been a draw. So Ruffy, okay, so when I watched the fight on Contenders and Laura was kind of comparing him to McGregor and stuff, like, I love Laura for sure, but like not every guy that kind of has his hands wide and has that kind of flowy style is like McGregor. Like, the volume difference between McGregor and Ruffy is night and day. Like, McGregor's got way higher. Ruffy does not have big volume. Ruffy does kind of have that sniper style, but to compare him to McGregor, firstly, he's a orthodox McGregor southpaw. Okay, he tries to snipe his right hand, and he's got his hands kind of, he does the flowy stuff. Like, that doesn't mean he's a McGregor type guy. He's got good calf kicks. He seems like a smart fighter, but I'm worried in fights that he's not knocking people out, that the margins are going to be super close. And Mullarkey has been chinned on multiple occasions. Y'all got to watch Mullarkey's knockout loss to Volk. Thank you, Volk, for being a true classy professional and not throwing a follow-up there. Like, thank you. Like, have you seen that knockout, dude? Devastating knockout that Volk had on Mullarkey. And the fact that he didn't throw a follow-up is probably the reason Mullarkey made it to the UFC, because that would have been like a death blow, bro. It's one of those things. If Mullarkey can just get to the grind, avoid like stupid exchanges, I mean, he has a higher work rate. It's just that Ruffy, super patient, can kind of lull guys into these low output fights, and he can kind of slowly, subtly chop you down with caps, and then eventually, find something up top with that straight right. So I do lean with Ruffy catching him at some time, but minus 200 when we're probably not going to be winning the minutes. We're not going to be picking this guy apart how I want us to, but we're probably going to catch him type thing. I say we as if like I'm Drake with the uniform on, but he thinks he's part of the team type shit. You know what I'm saying? No, I like both these guys, man, but I'm going to lean with Ruffy, but I'm not cool with this line. And, show me that you're on this level. Hey, prior to the fight he had on Contenders, he beat, do you remember Hanis Torres from the UFC? Like, if y'all remember that famous scene where I'm pretty damn sure it was Melvin Gillard versus Hanis Torres, and like the corner man dropped all the ice on the ground, and then Joe Rogan's freaking out, is absolutely hilarious. That was Hanis Torres versus Melvin Gillard. I'm pretty damn sure. And Ruffy actually beat Hanis Torres prior to getting that Contender Series call. So shout out to former UFC vet Hanis Torres. I always thought that they should have given him another chance, but that was like fucking 10 plus years ago. So, just had to show off my tenureship in this game. But but man, I think Ruffy can snipe at some point, but I just worry at minus 200 if he doesn't get the knockout. Mullarkey's a dog. Mullarkey can push a pace. Mullarkey is experienced. You got to give him credit, but I think at some point Ruffy does find that shot.
Yeah, and I'm feeling the same way about this one. I really like the way Ruffy fights, because from what I saw on tape from this guy, he's pretty tough. The takedown defense, Dan, is really good, man. It's really good. The fact that somebody named Magomedov wasn't trying to wrestle at all is probably a pretty good indication of what they saw on tape as well from Mauricio Ruffy, which is phenomenal takedown defense, a sniper-like counter right hand that comes down the pipe whenever you try to engage against this guy. And because he frustrates you by making you pay a price to entry, he's also really good at realizing what range he needs to be at to touch your calf, to slow you down, so that he can maybe be first later on in the fight and land those big shots. Because that's what we saw in the third round against Magomedov, was he just had kind of gotten into his rhythm then, you know, and then he figured, all right, I've got the range now. It took a while because this kid is good, but once he got the range and he found that first power shot, I mean, Magomedov fell apart like a Chinese motorcycle the very first minute that he landed that big shot, and it just snowballed from there. I think that's what's going to happen here. We have to worry about Mullarkey's chin. And this guy, Ruffy's got 9 professional wins, and all 9 of them are by KO. He finds that shot every single time. It's a function of the style that he fights with. And I think he's going to find it as well against Mullarkey, because Mullarkey is a guy who I think is going to try to wrestle some here. You know, he does. He attempts 7.1 takedowns per 15 minutes. He gets 2.4 of them. He does a nice job of mixing that in. But I think Ruffy's going to stop the takedowns. And I think maybe in the scrambles that are created from the failed takedown attempts, we're going to see Ruffy land something big. And once he does, it's going to fall apart. And I think he's going to finish this dude second or third round.
And one thing I wanted to mention, I don't remember if I forgot to mention in the Oralbai breakdown, but Oralbai and Ruffy, they're dropping from 170 to 155. So it's going to be interesting to see them in these probably more appropriate weight classes. And they both strike me as consummate professionals. So I don't see either guy missing weight. Watch them both miss weight. No, I don't see either guy. Go ahead.
And by the way, Oralbai is undefeated. Did you watch that loss against the Russian dude? Dude, he won all 3 rounds of that fight.
Great performance, though.
Yeah. Great performance by both fighters. Both fighters fought a great fight there, but I don't know how they came up with 2 rounds for Oralbai's opponent there. This guy should absolutely be undefeated right now. And
well, you know what, these judges, you know, maybe not DraftKings lineups in that organization, but betting odds. Yeah. You know, we got to look back at what the lines were and take it from there. You know what I'm saying, my man? But it's good to see both these fighters drop to their appropriate weight classes. So let's keep it short and sweet on this next one. Next up in the flyweight division, we got Diani Barboza. She's 6-2, taking on Ernesta Karakaite, who's 5-0. It's cool to see like a karate fighter named Karakaite. She's long for the weight class. If she can keep it standing at range, shit could get interesting. But Diani Barboza fought the way better level of competition, has a win over our girl Karine Silva, who's a ranked fighter, lost the decision to Jenna Bishop, who's legit as hell, who's about to fight Tyler Santos, and lost to Josiane Nunes, who's like, 2 or 3-1 in the UFC. So she's fought way better level of competition. There's a big edge on the mat for her. It's just, we know what we're worried about. What we're worried about is if she can't get her early submission and then she starts to fatigue a little bit. Then she's not able to get her takedowns. That's where she could get picked apart. But I do think there's a big edge on the ground, and I'm leaning to her kind of getting either control time or getting that early sub, and I'm going to go with Barboza here.
Yeah, same here. I parlayed up Barboza. Or no, I just bet her straight, actually, at -191. Kowalkiewicz has got phenomenal conditioning, a lot of volume on the feet, good striking. So if she can keep this fight standing, it's going to be interesting, especially as the fight goes on, because she's going to keep pushing. She's got great conditioning and volume. But Barboza, I think, is almost as good of a striker as Kowalkiewicz, but the difference on the ground here is massive. We saw Kowalkiewicz fight Letitia Blow twice in her career. Blow, a judo player, not unlike Barboza, who's a judo Olympian. Blow was getting those trip takedowns, those reaps, those inside reaps, and really giving Kowalkiewicz problems in the grappling area. I think Barboza is going to do the exact same thing here. And I think if it plays out on the feet, it's actually going to be pretty close too, because Barboza's got some nice power and some pretty technical striking in her own right. I like Barboza a lot here. I bet her, I laid juice on her money line. I think she gets the job done, potentially inside the distance, but most likely by decision.
Now, next up in the lightweight division, we got a matchup between Ismael Bonfim, he's 19-4, taking on Vince Pichel, who's 14-3. Currently, they got it. Another wide line. Bonfim -550. The comeback on Vince is +400. Hey, man, shout out to Vince Pichel, man. This is a guy who I watched on Tough 15, Tough Live, which I think is one of the best seasons of The Ultimate Fighter ever. The only one where the fights were live. You could bet on them. It was just such a great season. Produced a lot of great fighters. So I'll always be a Vince Pichel fan. You know, Vince is like 41, 42, but like he's not a guy who gets like knocked out every fight. Like I think like for his age, like he's a younger 41, 42, but still 41, 42 nonetheless. But Vince from Hell Pichel, man, I mean, like if he can get his grappling going, he can take guys through hell. Like he's relentless. The only thing is like with Bonfim, if Bonfim is able to keep the standing, I think there's a big volume edge on the feet. His boxing for MMA isn't half bad. It's just about, I'm not laying no minus 550 on Bonfim, and there is a path to victory for Vince. And I don't want to be disrespectful or anything like that, but I was at Vince's last fight against Marco Madsen. That was his last fight, right? That was same night that
yes,
Aldo
that was the one.
Here. Yeah, that was a long ass time ago. A lot's changed since then. He was already like 40 then. So yeah, so like, and I felt like, even though that's a completely different matchup, taking on a wrestler of the caliber of Madsen. Don't get me started on that. After the stun against Dawson, let's not even go there. I'll go off on a fucking tangent. But I just kind of saw not a decline, but like, it's not like, again, it's not a decline where like you're seeing like him get rocked by jabs or first punch is going to put him out. It's just like he's just slightly slower, as you'd expect a 40, 41, 42-year-old to be. He's had a long career, man. And Bonfim, like I said, for MMA standards, his boxing is not half bad. Not the most athletic guy, definitely not as athletic as his brother. Are they real brothers? They half brothers, I'm curious about that. But back to this. It's just about, can Vince get the grind going or not? I don't think Vince is going to out-volume this guy on the feet. I absolutely do not think that. It's just about, can you get the grind going? We know Bonfim can be taken down. But I think at this point in their careers, Bonfim, he's going to be in the UFC in the next 2 years, whereas I think Vince is kind of getting a little bit closer to retirement. I just don't want to sound like I'm discrediting a guy who I've been watching how many fucking years, you know what I'm saying? Like, I respect Vince so much. From hell, Pichel, you're the man. But circle of life. And one more thing, we talked about how there was like a 17-year age gap in the Lucindo fight. Then there's like a 12 or 13-year age gap here, which is pretty interesting.
13.
I'm gonna go with the younger fighter, but I'm not that confident. Like, I'm not that like sold on Bonfim. Like, show me something, dude. Like, and that flying knee against Terrence was great, but like, you know how I like to say, if you haven't figured out how to beat this guy, then there's a problem, blah, blah, blah. Well, if you haven't figured out how to beat Terrence McKinney, all you do is you get him past round one and you win. So that's exactly what my boy did. Hey, you executed the game plan. You got a knockout of the year. You love to see it. But Vince has never like had some cardio issues. So it's just about, can Vince relentlessly grind for 3 or at least win 2 of the rounds with takedowns. But like you said, they don't give a fuck about humping legs anymore like they used to. So I just think that when Bonfim gets back up, there'll be a volume difference and you'll probably win a decision because of that.
Yeah, I feel like this one's dog or pass, Dan, but Pichel's 41 years old, but he's on a 2-year layoff and this guy doesn't fight often. He's had like a 3-year layoff in the past. He's on a 2-year layoff right now. He only fights about once a year. So there are 35-year-olds like Anthony Smith who have 54 professional fights in over 400 minutes in the cage. And then there's 41-year-olds like Vince Pichel who only have 160 minutes of pro cage time. He's only got 9 UFC fights. He debuted 12 years ago against Rustam Khabilov, and he's got 9 UFC fights. So this guy just doesn't fight very often. But as a result of that, there's not a ton of miles on the engine, so he might look a little bit better than what you expect a 41-year-old to look like. And Vince is very durable. He has been finished twice as a pro, but one of them was by suplexes in the Khabilov fight, and I mean, like, that's not what Bonfim does. And the other one was by submission in the Gregor Gillespie fight. Completely different fight here. I bet the fight goes to decision here. Because instead of just going and saying, like, I think that Vince Pichel at 41 years old is going to fly to Rio and beat Ismail Bonfim, a 28-year-old kid who's actually got more fights and more pro experience at the age of 28 than Vince does at the age of 41. Ismail Bonfim debuted as a professional at the age of 15. So this guy's got a ton of experience for a young man. So I'm with you. I think Bonfim gets the job done, but I think he wins by decision. I think his finishing equity in this spot is being way overrated against a really well-rounded and experienced and durable veteran like Pichel. So Bonfim by decision, I think he's got some value. And I also bet the fight goes to decision for this fight. I forget where I got it right now, but it was pretty close to even money. I think maybe plus 120 or something.
Now, last but not least, kicking off the card in the flyweight division, we got a banger. We got Alessandro Acosta. He's 13-4, taking on Peru's Kevin Borjas, who's 9-2. Currently, They got it. Alessandro -140. The comeback on Borjas is +120. This is a hell of a fight. I mean, listen, Alessandro Costa has gone out there and like he's fought Amir Albazi, who's a future #1 contender, and he's fought Steve Erceg, who's fighting for the title this weekend. So those are not bad losses. And I felt like he competed well in round 1 against Albazi, and I felt like he competed well all 3 rounds against Erceg. And then, like I talk about with Jimmy Flick, every single guy that fights Jimmy Flick looks like a world champion until they either beat him or until they get caught by him. Like Malcolm fucking Gordon looked like a world champion. My boy Cody, who got caught, and if they ever ran it back, you know what would happen. But Cody looked like a world champion against him. Alessandro Costa looked like a world champion against him. Like all these dudes that fight Flick look like world champions against them until they either win or lose. Borjas, dude, I've been impressed with Borjas. And man, I wish Cody was on here right now because the guy that Borjas beat on Contender Series is the guy that Cody's trained with many times, Victor Diaz. And Cody's told me Victor Diaz is a hell of a grappler, super strong. But the issue was like in the gym, don't quote me on this, but in the gym, that Diaz guy weighs like what, like fucking 145 to 160. And in the gym, he's the biggest monster. But when you drop to 25s, that's when, you know, shit goes south. And he was still able to get takedowns on Borjas, but Borjas is able to pop back up. He's got that dog in him. And like these Peruvians are emerging, man. Like Peru used to be a fucking laughing stock of MMA back in the day. Now these guys, like you saw what Jesus Pinedo's been on. There's a few other dudes. And I bet on Borjas in that fight against Van as like a +220 dog. And he like dropped Van, had a great fight with Van. I was impressed. So here, it's interesting because I think that Alessandro might be the better athlete, might be a little bit more physical, but I think that Borjas has more volume. And I just see it being an honest 3-round scrap where both these guys are getting after it. And yeah, let's see what it comes down to. But I think that, you know, once you get that UFC debut behind you, you come back in your second appearance, a little bit more comfortable. You feel like you belong. And this is closer to home for Borjas. We're no longer, you know, in the States. Now, this dude's coming out here, Peru to Brazil. What's the distance between Peru and Brazil? I mean, it's got to be fucking. Let me look up what the flight is.
It's not that bad. They're actually neighbors.
Flight time Peru to Brazil.
Depends where in Brazil. Brazil's gigantic.
Shit. It's actually longer than I thought. Shit. 4 hours. I thought it'd be like a 1 or 2 hour flight. But either way, what I'm trying to make is we're still like in, you know, in his region of the world. Yeah, you know, I think it's a dog or pass situation. I really like Costa. He swings big hooks. I enjoy watching him fight. And again, he's been through the ringer. He's fought real guys like Albazi, who I think will fight for a title one day, Erceg, who is fighting for a title, and he competed in both those fights. So I respect that. But I think Borjas has a little bit more volume, a little bit more output, but less experience, you know, at the higher level. So should be interesting, but I kind of do view it as a dog or pass, and I'm gonna lean with Peru to get his first UFC win.
Yeah, this is a great fight to start the card, man. I'm on the Costa side. There's a lot of things that I like in terms of he's the more experienced fighter overall and at the UFC level. The dude is a legit Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He's training with Diego Lopez and those guys up at altitude. Really good boxing coaches in Mexico. So he does have a really educated, high defensive guard when he's boxing. But you can tell he's not really worried when he boxes about like, I'll point this guy. No, man, he gets into that pocket and he swings. He's looking to take your head off. And I think that there's the grappling upside also is on the Costa side, as well as the strength of schedule advantage. So I think that there's a lot of things on paper that are good here on the Costa side, especially with him being the home fighter, you know, so crowd will be cheering when he's landing shots. The crowd will be quiet when Borjas is landing shots. So I do think that Costa gets the job done here, probably. And I even took a small shot on Costa by submission here, because I think that's where the biggest deficiency is in this fight. I think Costa's the much better grappler. We've seen Borjas get submitted on the regional scene against Renzo Mendes in Combate, and that was the highest level fight that he had up to that point before going to Dana White's Contender Series. So I think Costa might be live for a submission here. I played it small at +550 for a quarter unit. And I'm picking Costa to win, but I think this is going to be a hell of a fight.
Absolutely. And Weezy, you know, we could sit here for the next 2 hours and mention all the things we left out. And yeah, I can talk fights with you forever, but we got to get out of here. We hit the 2-hour mark. The fans can follow you at MMA Weezy on Stats Diggers, Ass Shaving of the Week. I know you got all kinds of badass content. Any message for the fans before I get you out of here?
Yeah, man, let's stack cash tickets like flapjacks for UFC 301 and check me out tonight. If you're watching here on Wednesday, we're debuting a new show called Probability. We've done it before in the past, but I've created some new analytical packages for UFC gamblers, whether you are a money line bettor, a prop bettor, a DFS player, or a prize picks or underdog player. I have a comprehensive statistics package that's available. We're going to be debuting that on DFS by the Numbers YouTube channel tonight at 10:15 Eastern time. Probability is the name of the show. And I'm making between now and then an instructional video on how to use the statistical products that I've invented over here. So I'm really looking forward to debuting that tonight. Thanks for having me on, Dan. I've been watching you for the longest time. I truly appreciate all the sacrifices and work you put out to the community of ours that we all share and we all love. So thanks for having me on, and I hope we all cash some bets this weekend.
My pleasure, my man. And for the fans, y'all saw on Twitter, I was having a contest. If you could guess what soccer jersey I was going to wear on this episode, I'm going to give you a free piece of UFC memorabilia. I sent it out to you because for the Potieria Volt card, I wore a Real Madrid Higuain jersey, you know, Spain, you know, Potieria winning the belt. I had a 4-unit bet, a dog odds on Potieria. Here, we're back in Brazil, so the jersey is number 9, the original Ronaldo. I'm not talking about my boy Cristiano. I'm talking about the original Brazilian Ronaldo. So I'm about to go look through the entry, see if anyone guessed that. And thank you to Weezy. Thank you to Cody Durden. Thank you to the fans for all your support through the thick, the thin. I truly, truly appreciate it. Y'all have a great weekend. And until the next time, let's cash these bets.